Ancient stone roads connect sites that should have nothing to do with each other. This is the mystery of the megalithic causeways, and it forces a complete rewrite of early human history. By the end, you will see the ancient world as a single, stunningly interconnected story. Why would cultures separated by oceans and millennia build identical stone highways between sacred places? What secret knowledge did they share? What do you believe is the most powerful force that connects humanity across time? These ancient stone highways are a physical paradox. To understand why, we must first see them for what they truly are. A megalithic causeway is far more than a simple footpath worn into the earth by time. It is a deliberate, engineered statement. Imagine a formally constructed avenue, often raised above the surrounding landscape, built from massive stones or carefully packed earth, stretching for miles in a remarkably straight line. These are not meandering trails, they are linear monuments in their own right, sometimes flanked by parallel banks or dug-out ditches, showcasing a level of planning and communal labor that is breathtaking. The sheer scale of the undertaking is what first captures the imagination. We are talking about structures that can extend for over 10 kilometers, involving the precise placement of thousands upon thousands of tons of stone and soil. This was not a casual project. It was a generations-long commitment, a profound investment of a community's energy and identity into the very land itself. But here is where the mystery deepens and where our conventional historical models begin to strain. The true enigma is not found in the corridor. It consists of two massive, parallel earthen banks, often with external ditches, creating a formal, enclosed avenue that can run for astonishing distances. The scale is almost incomprehensible from the ground. The Dorset Cursus, for example, is a breathtaking 10-kilometer-long corridor etched across the countryside. Walking its length would take hours, a journey through a man-made canyon of earth under an immense sky. But the true purpose of these colossal structures lies not in their construction, but in their connections. Archaeologists have meticulously mapped these avenues and discovered a startling pattern. The Cursus monuments do not simply cross the landscape randomly. They act as deliberate, linear connectors. One end of a Cursus might align precisely with a long barrow, an early Neolithic communal resting place built from earth and timber. The other end might point directly toward a later henge monument, a circular enclosure that would become the template for sites like Stonehenge. Here is the cultural disconnect. The people who built the Cursus, early farmers with distinct tools and traditions, were formally linking their sacred space to places that were already ancient, already hallowed by the people who came before them. This was not an accident of geography. This was a conscious, generations-long project to stitch their own identity into a pre-existing spiritual map. The Cursus becomes a stone and earth thread, weaving together the sacred geography of different epochs. It suggests that for these Neolithic communities, the power of a place was not owned by a single culture, but was a legacy to be acknowledged, connected to, and incorporated. They were not building on empty land. They were building a physical lineage, a ceremonial highway that declared their reverence for the same points on the landscape that had captivated their ancestors centuries earlier. This same principle of sacred connection appears in a world away, across the Atlantic Ocean and under a dense jungle canopy. In the heart of the ancient Maya world, engineers and priests built their own version of the megalithic causeway, known as the Sacbeob. These were not simple jungle paths. They were elevated white roads, meticulously paved with limestone stucco that gleamed under the sun, cutting straight lines through the tangled green. These roads connected sprawling cities, grand ceremonial plazas, and sacred cenotes, the natural sinkholes considered portals to the underworld. The scale is staggering. The most famous of these, known as Sacbeob, runs for 100 kilometers, linking the powerful city of Cobá to the distant center of Yaxuna. Imagine the statement of that single white line across the landscape, a visible thread of unity in a world of independent city-states. While the Maya shared a broader cultural and linguistic identity, these roads often connected places with very distinct architectural styles and separate ruling dynasties. This tells us the Sacbeob were about far more than moving goods for trade. They were formal conduits for pilgrimage, for political alliance, and most importantly, for the shared performance of ritual. A king from one city could travel the White Road to participate in a ceremony at another city's temple, physically enacting a connection under the eyes of the gods. The road itself was a cosmological symbol. Many were deliberately aligned with celestial events, like the path of the sun on the solstice or the rise of Venus. In this way, the Maya transformed their entire landscape into a living map of the heavens. Each Sacbe was not just a physical connection between 2 points, but a ritual bond that tied separate communities into a shared spiritual framework, proving that the urge to build monumental pathways is a human impulse that transcends any single continent or culture. The gleaming white roads of the Maya lead us to a different kind of pathway, one not of stone or earth, but of pure alignment. Across the Atlantic, in the misty landscapes of Europe, we find a phenomenon that echoes the same deep-seated human impulse to connect point to point. This is the world of ancient alignments, a concept that lives in our modern imagination as ley lines. While the popular idea of a global energy grid is a 20th century invention, it taps into a genuine archaeological mystery. The truth is more fascinating than fiction. From the windswept coasts of Scotland to the sun-baked plains of Portugal, Neolithic and Bronze Age cultures were meticulously engineering their landscapes with straight lines. They were building invisible causeways of sight. Nowhere is this more breathtakingly clear than at Carnac in Brittany, France. Here, over 3,000 individual standing stones were arranged by a single culture into astonishing parallel rows that march across the countryside for kilometers. Walking among them is like moving through a petrified army, a silent geometry imposed upon the land. The purpose of these rows is one of archaeology's great puzzles. They were not walls, nor were they roofs. They are open avenues. Crucially, these stone avenues often point with deliberate intent. If you stand at one end and look down the long corridor, your gaze is directed toward a distant burial mound on the horizon, or a distinctive hill or a source of water. The stones themselves create a physical guide, a processional way that channels movement and vision toward a specific, sacred endpoint. This practice was not unique to Karnak. All across Europe, we find evidence that ancient builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of landscape geometry. They would position a single standing stone so that, from its location, it framed the rising sun on a solstice over a distant mountain peak. They would build a burial chamber whose entrance aligned perfectly with a star that only appeared once in a generation. These were not random placements. Each monument was a node in a vast, intentional network where sightlines themselves became the most sacred pathways. Think of it as an ancient navigation system, but one designed not for trade, but for ritual. The landscape was their cathedral, and these alignments were the architectural lines that defined it. An individual could walk from a stone row to a barrow, following a path laid out centuries before, and in doing so, walk a route that connected earth to sky, the living to the memory of those who came before, along an invisible causeway of cultural memory written directly into the very shape of the world. This precise dating is where the mystery transforms from curious to profound. Modern science gives us tools like radiocarbon dating, which analyzes the remains of organic materials, and optically stimulated luminescence, which measures when grains of sand were last exposed to sunlight. These are not guesses, they are clocks embedded in the soil and stone, and what these clocks tell us is consistently jarring. They reveal that the two ends of a single megalithic causeway are often not contemporaries. One site might be firmly dated to the early Neolithic period, around 4,000 years before the Common Era. The other terminus, connected by that same deliberate roadway, might date to the late Bronze Age, a full 2,000 years later. We are not talking about a gap of a few generations. We are talking about a span of time greater than that which separates us from the Roman Empire. Imagine walking a road built in the 21st century that leads directly and solely to a monument constructed when the pyramids were new. That is the scale of chronological incongruity we are dealing with. The cultural evidence deepens the puzzle. Archaeologists excavating these connected sites often find completely different styles of pottery, distinct types of tools, and contrasting approaches to honoring those who came before. The people who built the starting point of the causeway may have practiced communal burials in long earthen mounds. The people who built the ending point centuries later might have adopted a new tradition of individual cremations placed in pottery urns. These are not subtle variations, they are markers of different cultural identities, different ways of seeing the world. So we are left with a scenario that defies simple explanation. This is not a society building a practical road from its capital to a newly conquered territory. This is a later culture with its own gods, its own customs, and its own technology, investing a staggering amount of communal labor to construct a formal, monumental pathway leading directly to a place that was already ancient history. They bypassed all the practical locations a new road might serve to connect with a relic. The question this forces upon us is perhaps the most important one in this entire mystery. Why? What compelled these people to reach back through the centuries and physically stitch their world to the world of their distant, and perhaps entirely forgotten, predecessors? Was it a rediscovery of a sacred place, a feeling of reverence for the monumental work of the ancients, or was it something else, a deeper, shared understanding of the land itself that transcended their own cultural moment? The answer to that question lies at the heart of a debate that has shaped archaeology for over a century. To understand why these causeways appear globally, we must weigh two compelling theories. The first is diffusionism. This idea suggests that complex cultural practices like monumental architecture originate in one core area and then spread outward, carried by migrating peoples, long-distance traders, or the slow ripple of shared ideas. It paints a picture of a connected ancient world where knowledge was a traveler. The opposing theory is independent invention. This argues that different human societies, when faced with similar challenges or when reaching similar levels of social organization, can and do arrive at strikingly similar solutions entirely on their own without any contact. It speaks to a shared human ingenuity. When we look at our megalithic causeways, both theories seem to have merit, but the evidence pushes us toward a profound realization. Consider the vast distances involved. The chalk-built Cursus of Neolithic Britain and the gleaming white Sacbeob of the classic Maya are separated by over 5,000 miles of ocean and nearly 4,000 years of time. There is no credible archaeological evidence, no trail of artifacts or genetic markers, to suggest a Maya architect visited Salisbury Plain or that a British stone layer traveled to the Yucatan. The practical case for direct cultural diffusion here is incredibly thin. This points powerfully toward independent invention, and that conclusion is what makes the phenomenon so deeply significant. It means that the drive to build these monumental linear pathways is not a cultural quirk of one specific people. It is a recurring human impulse. It emerges again and again when a society reaches a certain threshold of complexity, stability, and cosmological curiosity. Think of it as a kind of deep structural grammar of ritual. Just as languages around the world independently developed nouns and verbs to describe reality, cultures around the world independently developed the concept of the formal sacred path to structure their spiritual reality. They looked at their world, its hills, its water sources, its cyclical heavens, and felt a compelling need to not just acknowledge these powerful places, but to physically link them. The causeway becomes the sentence written on the landscape, connecting the sacred nouns of mountain, spring, and tomb with the verb of ceremonial procession. This independent convergence tells us something fundamental about the human mind and our relationship with place. It suggests that when we seek meaning, we instinctively seek connection, and we feel a profound desire to make that connection permanent, visible, and monumental. But if this impulse is so universal, what exactly were these pathways designed to do? What specific human need were they built to fulfill? The sky above them was not a distant spectacle, it was the ultimate clock and compass. This shared celestial reality offers a powerful key to understanding the global pattern of these causeways. One of the most compelling universal drivers behind these structures is astronomy. Across continents, we find that these ancient pathways are not randomly oriented. Many exhibit precise, deliberate alignments to the solstice sunrises and sunsets, to the extreme rising points of the moon, or to the heliacal rising of prominent stars like Sirius or the Pleiades. They are stone and earth expressions of celestial mechanics. The great Stonehenge Cursus, that vast earthen corridor lying north of the famous stone circle, provides a stunning example. Its entire length is aligned on an east-west axis, framing the sunrise on the spring and autumn equinoxes. On those 2 days each year, the sun would have risen directly over the eastern terminal of the Cursus, flooding the entire ceremonial avenue with light. This transforms the causeway from a simple path into a sophisticated timekeeping device, a calendar etched permanently into the landscape. The act of walking the causeway on that specific morning was not just a procession, it was a ritual reenactment of a cosmic event. Participants were physically tracing the path of the sun, connecting the rhythm of their community directly to the immutable order of the heavens. This astronomical purpose reframes the connected sites entirely. The burial mound at one end and the henge at the other were likely not chosen arbitrarily. They were carefully selected and perhaps even built or modified to serve as permanent markers in a giant, interactive observatory. The causeway itself acts as the pointer, the sight line made solid. The terminal sites become the fixed foresights and backsights, like the notches on a giant surveying instrument laid across miles of countryside. This reveals a staggering level of long-term planning and shared knowledge. A culture might build a mound to mark a significant lunar rising point. Centuries later, a new group arriving in the area could recognize that precise alignment, understand its celestial significance, and feel compelled to formalize it by building a causeway that physically connected it to another sacred point, perhaps one that marked the winter solstice sunset. In this way, the landscape itself became a sacred text, written in alignments, and the causeways were the lines drawn between the most important celestial paragraphs. Different cultures, separated by time, could essentially read the same page and add to the same story. Their shared reverence for the sky created a common language that transcended their differences in pottery or burial rites. The monument was not just the stone or the mound, it was the entire alignment. The connection itself was the sacred artifact. But if the sky provided the map, what was the journey for? What profound human experience were these celestial pathways designed to facilitate? That celestial journey was likely a path walked not just in spirit, but in body by countless feet over generations. The spiritual dimension of these causeways points us toward one of humanity's oldest and most profound practices, pilgrimage. This hypothesis transforms these stone avenues from astronomical instruments into sacred storylines, etched into the earth for the living to follow. Imagine a community gathering at dawn at the edge of their village, Before them lies not a wild trail, but a formally constructed road, raised and defined, leading straight toward a distant, hallowed mound visible on the horizon. The journey along that causeway was not a commute, it was a ceremony in motion. Every step along that prescribed, unwavering path was a step away from the everyday world of chores and shelter, and a step toward the realm of the ancestors, the gods, and eternal truths. The road itself acted as a guide, removing all uncertainty from the pilgrim's passage. There were no forks to ponder, no deviations to tempt them. The architecture of the causeway funneled their focus, creating a linear narrative of transition. By the time they reached the terminal sanctuary or the ancient burial place, they had been psychologically prepared, separated from the profane by the very act of walking the sacred line. This practice of ritual procession is something we can still understand today. Think of the long walk to a revered site, the way the journey builds anticipation and strips away distraction, making the final arrival feel earned and transformative. For these ancient cultures, the causeway guaranteed that transformative experience for every participant, generation after generation. But the sacred nature of these roads may have begun long before the first pilgrim set foot on them. The immense communal labor of building the causeway, quarrying the stone, moving the earth, aligning the banks was itself likely a powerful ritual. It bonded the community in a shared, generational project that literally changed the face of their world. They were not just building a road, they were collectively writing their devotion into the landscape, creating a permanent testament to their faith and unity. This brings us to a particularly fascinating political and spiritual possibility. When a new culture moved into a region and discovered the monumental tombs of a much older, forgotten people, what did they see? They likely saw evidence of immense power and deep antiquity. By constructing a formal causeway from their own new ceremonial center directly to that ancient tomb, they were doing something brilliant. They were physically stitching their own identity and authority to the numinous power of that ancient place. It was a claim of spiritual inheritance. They were declaring through architecture that the sacredness of the land had been passed to them, that they were the legitimate heirs to its deep history. The causeway became a stone certificate of legitimacy, a public work that demonstrated their reverence while solidifying their right to be there. The road served both the living pilgrim and the authority of the ruler, connecting the community to its past to secure its future. Yet this profound spiritual function leads to another, more tangible mystery. If these were pilgrimage routes, what was moving along them? Were they only for processions of people, or did they also carry something more physical, something that required their monumental strength? But the stones themselves may have been more than markers on a map of the sky. To truly understand the minds of the builders, we must step into a worldview where the earth itself is alive. This brings us to the controversial yet persistent idea of geomancy. In its simplest form, geomancy is the ancient practice of reading the landscape, of sensing a living energy or spirit within the earth itself. Proponents of this view argue that the builders of these causeways were not just astronomers or engineers, but spiritual geologists. They suggest that ancient cultures could somehow detect subtle currents or lines of force, what we might call ley lines flowing through the ground. From this perspective, a megalithic causeway was not built on a convenient route, but directly on top of a perceived current of earth energy, acting as a formal channel to amplify or direct that power. Its purpose was to connect powerful nodes, a sacred spring bursting from the ground, a hill that hummed with presence, or a cluster of ancient trees, creating a controlled spiritual circuit. Now, it is crucial to note that mainstream archaeology firmly dismisses the literal existence of measurable earth energies or a global ley line grid. There is no scientific instrument, no repeatable experiment that has ever detected such a force. The evidence simply is not there in a way that satisfies empirical scrutiny. Yet, to dismiss the entire theory out of hand is to miss its profound cultural insight. the real power of the geomantic idea is not in its physics but in its psychology. It forces us to recognize that ancient peoples almost certainly perceived their world in a way we have largely forgotten. They did not see a landscape of inert rock and soil. They saw a living, breathing entity pulsing with spirit and agency. A particular location was not just scenic, it was numinous. It held a tangible presence, a concentration of power that demanded acknowledgement. A spring was not just a water source, it was the home of a deity. A solitary, lightning-scarred oak was not just a tree, it was a witness to generations. An ancient burial mound was not just a pile of earth, it was a place where the veil between worlds was thin. If you see the world this way, then the act of building a monumental causeway takes on a completely different meaning. You are not simply constructing a road for pilgrims. You are performing a kind of spiritual acupuncture on the land itself. You are laying down a stone conduit to harmonize the flow of power between two sacred points, to create a stable, ceremonial channel where that energy can be safely accessed, celebrated, and perhaps even harnessed for the good of the community. This concept of navigating a sentient landscape could arise completely independently within different shamanistic traditions across the globe. A Maya priest sensing the power of a cenote and a Celtic druid feeling the spirit of a forest grove might arrive at the same conclusion, that these places must be formally linked. The causeway, then, becomes the ultimate expression of this worldview, a permanent architectural prayer etched into the body of the earth. It bridges the seen and the unseen, making the intangible pathways of spirit tangible and walkable. Whether or not we believe in the literal energy, we must accept that they did, and that belief alone was powerful enough to move mountains of stone. This leaves us with a final, haunting possibility. If these causeways are threads in a global tapestry of sacred connection, what does their gradual disappearance from our world tell us about our own relationship with the land, and what might we have lost when we stopped building them? The sheer physical reality of these causeways is a testament to forgotten genius. To move beyond the profound why and confront the staggering how is to meet the ancient builders on their own terms, as master engineers and unparalleled organizers. Constructing a 10-kilometer-long, perfectly straight avenue of earth or stone across rolling countryside was not an act of faith alone. It was a monumental feat of logistics that would challenge a modern project manager. This work required something even more rare than strong backs. It demanded a society capable of breathtaking social coordination. The very existence of these causeways implies a centralized authority, a governing vision with the power to mobilize, feed, and house a dedicated labor force not for weeks, but for entire seasons, perhaps even for generations. Think of the scale. This was not a village building a fence. This was a civilization deciding to permanently alter the fundamental grammar of its homeland. The techniques they developed reveal both ingenuity and adaptation. On the chalk downs of Neolithic Britain, builders would dig two massive parallel ditches, piling the excavated earth and rubble between them to create the signature raised banks of the Cursus. The ditches weren't just waste pits, they were integral, defining the sacred corridor and likely serving as symbolic boundaries between the ceremonial way and the ordinary world. Across the ocean, Maya engineers faced a different challenge: the dense rainforest and wet limestone bedrock. Their solution was the Sacbeob, a raised roadway built like a stone sandwich. They would construct two parallel retaining walls from cut stone, then fill the interior corridor layer by layer with rubble, gravel, and finally, a smooth, gleaming cap of white lime plaster that hardened into a durable surface. Each culture, using the materials at hand, arrived at a similar architectural answer, a formal, elevated path that stood apart from the natural terrain. The logistics behind this work boggle the mind. Consider the chain of tasks. First, the route had to be surveyed with incredible precision over miles, maintaining a straight line that often ignored minor hills and valleys. How did they do it without lasers or theodolites? They almost certainly used a system of simple yet brilliant sighting methods. Teams would have placed tall wooden poles along the intended route, using the human eye to align them perfectly against the horizon, creating a visual guideline that could stretch for kilometers. Moving the material was the next Herculean task. For the Maya, this meant quarrying thousands of tons of limestone, likely using wooden sledges, rollers, and ropes with human muscle as the engine. In Britain, it meant moving even greater volumes of earth and chalk, using antler picks and leather baskets. This was not haphazard toil. It was a coordinated symphony of labor, with different groups assigned to quarrying, transport, and construction, all requiring careful timing and management. Most critically, this workforce had to be sustained. They needed food, water, and shelter, which means a large portion of the community that was not on the construction line was dedicated to supporting those who were, through farming, hunting, and cooking. This level of social stratification and economic planning is the hallmark of a complex, sophisticated civilization. It shatters any lingering notion of these being simple, primitive societies. They were cultures with a grand, collective vision, possessing the administrative skill to turn that vision into enduring stone and earth. They looked at a wild landscape and saw not an obstacle, but a canvas, and they possessed the technical and social genius to draw their sacred blueprints directly upon it, in lines so bold we can still walk them today. This intricate web of ritual pathways finds its most famous expression on the Salisbury Plain. The landscape around Stonehenge is not a blank slate with a single mysterious circle. It is a dense, layered manuscript, and the Cursus monuments are some of its oldest, boldest sentences. The Greater Stonehenge Cursus is a colossal earthwork, a roughly 3-kilometer-long enclosure defined by its parallel banks and ditches. Its sheer scale is humbling, a vast ceremonial corridor carved into the chalk long before the first bluestone was ever placed at the nearby circle. Its orientation is the first clue, running a near-perfect east-west line. This alignment is not arbitrary. If you stood at its western end at dawn on the spring equinox, you would witness the sun rising directly over its far eastern terminus. But that terminus is not just an empty point on the horizon. It aligns precisely with a long barrow, an even older communal resting place built by the earliest Neolithic farmers. Here, in one structure, we see the core mystery made physical. A later culture built a monumental avenue that deliberately connected their ceremonial space to a sacred site constructed by their predecessors centuries before. The Cursus acts as a grand processional way, channeling movement and vision from a place of the living community toward a place of the ancestral dead, all under the watchful eye of the equinox sun. This was just the beginning of the story. Centuries later, during the Bronze Age, the builders of the Stonehenge we recognize today added another chapter. They constructed the Stonehenge Avenue, a parallel banked causeway that connects the stone circle to the River Avon, nearly 3 kilometers away. This creates a breathtaking sequence of connection across millennia. First, an ancient tomb is built. Then, a Cursus is constructed to formally link to that tomb. Later still, a revolutionary stone circle is erected nearby. And finally, an avenue is built to link that new circle to the life-giving waters of the river. The landscape becomes a palimpsest, a parchment written, scraped clean, and written over again, but where every previous layer remains faintly visible and deeply respected. Each generation did not erase the sacred geography of the last. Instead, they added new links, new pathways, weaving their own beliefs into a pre-existing network. They were not building in isolation. They were adding a new station to a spiritual railway that had been under construction for over 1,000 years. The Stonehenge landscape, therefore, is not a collection of separate monuments. It is a single, integrated machine for ritual, where the Cursus and the avenue are the connecting cables, powering a circuit between ancestors, the heavens, the living, and the vital forces of nature. This deep time collaboration begs a question that reaches far beyond England. If this pattern of connection over centuries occurred here, where else might we find it? Perhaps in places we have not even thought to look. Cobá's power was written not just in stone, but in lines. Deep in the heart of the Yucatan Peninsula, this ancient Maya metropolis did not merely have roads, it was a city of roads, a hub from which over 50 gleaming white causeways radiated outward like the spokes of a colossal wheel. Each Sacbeob was a declaration, a linear extension of Cobá's influence carved directly into the jungle. These were not meandering trails worn by time. They were engineered highways raised above the swampy ground, paved with smooth limestone stucco that would have shone brilliantly under the tropical sun, visible for miles. They connected the bustling central plazas and towering pyramids of Cobá to a vast network of outlying farming villages, to distant, powerful cities, and most significantly, to the sacred cenotes, those deep natural sinkholes that the Maya revered as portals to the watery underworld, the realm of the gods. This network transforms our understanding of what a causeway system could achieve. It was far more than practical infrastructure for moving goods, though it certainly did that. It was a physical manifestation of political and spiritual authority. To build and maintain such an expansive web of roads required a staggering concentration of wealth and labor. It signaled to everyone in the region that Cobá commanded the resources, and the organized will to reshape the very landscape, binding distant places to its core. The longest of these causeways, the 100-kilometer road to Yaxuna, is a breathtaking example. Its construction was an act of sheer ambition, a thin, straight line of white cutting through dense, unforgiving jungle for a distance that would take days to walk. This was not a trade route in a simple economic sense. A journey of that length and difficulty along a formal, sacred avenue points directly toward ceremonial pilgrimage. We can envision processions of priests, nobles, and pilgrims traveling this gleaming path during pivotal moments in the Maya calendar, like the turning of a Cayatun, a 20-year cycle. The act of walking the Sacbeob from Cobá to Yaxuna would have been a ritual in motion, a journey that physically enacted the connection between two powerful centers under the watchful eyes of the deities, reinforcing a shared cosmic order. Yet here lies the fascinating nuance. Despite this clear demonstration of Cobá's dominance, the cities and settlements connected by these roads often retained their own unique artistic styles, their own local ruling dynasties, and their own architectural signatures. This suggests the Sacbeob network did not create a monolithic, centralized empire like later models in history. Instead, it likely facilitated a different, more flexible model of interconnection, a kind of ritual and economic federation. Cobá may have been the dominant hub, the spiritual and political heart, but the connected sites were not mere provinces. They were partners in a shared system, bound together by mutual participation in ceremonies, by the exchange of prestige goods and ideas that flowed along those white roads, and by a collective reverence for the sacred geography that the causeways so deliberately linked. The causeway, therefore, was both a symbol of Cobá's hegemony and the very thread that wove a diverse region into a coherent, functioning whole. It showcases a model where interconnection did not require cultural uniformity, but was sustained through the powerful, shared practice of moving together along a sacred path. These ancient pathways have not always remained visible to the eye. For every monumental stone row still standing proud on a windswept plain, there are dozens more that have vanished from the surface, erased by centuries of plowing, settlement, and the slow, patient work of nature. They have become ghost roads, but their memory is still written into the earth, waiting for the right conditions to reveal their secrets. This is where modern technology steps in, acting as a kind of X-ray vision for the landscape. The field of aerial archaeology has transformed our understanding. From high above, patterns emerge that are invisible to someone standing on the ground. In a dry summer, for instance, crops grow differently over buried features. Where an ancient ditch once was, filled with richer, deeper soil, the wheat or barley grows taller and greener, creating a dark line. Conversely, where a solid stone foundation or a compacted bank lies just beneath the surface, the crops are stunted, creating a pale line. From the air, these crop marks form crisp, geometric outlines, the perfect rectangles of buried enclosures, the sweeping curves of old field systems, and most importantly for our story, the long, straight, parallel lines of forgotten causeways. These are the ghostly imprints of ancient intentions, a hidden script only readable from the sky. But the most revolutionary tool in this search is LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. Imagine a plane or a drone flying over a dense, impenetrable rainforest, firing millions of laser pulses toward the ground. These pulses penetrate the smallest gaps in the canopy, bounce off the solid earth below, and return to a sensor. By calculating the time each pulse takes to return, a computer can build an astonishingly precise three-dimensional map of the ground surface, digitally stripping away every single tree, bush, and vine. What is left is the bare skin of the earth, and it is covered in scars we never knew were there. In the Amazon basin, LiDAR has revealed vast, complex networks of raised causeways and roads connecting ancient settlements, proving the rainforest was not a pristine wilderness but a carefully managed, populated landscape. In the jungles of Central America, it has uncovered entire cities crisscrossed with Sacbeob, their layouts now clear as day. Each of these laser-revealed lines is a ghost causeway, a testament to a practice so common it shaped continents. Every new discovery is a humbling reminder. The majestic sites we visit today, Stonehenge, Karnak, Cobá, are not the rule. They are the rare exceptions, the fragments that somehow survived the relentless tide of time. They are the surviving peaks of a mountain range that has mostly eroded away. The ghost causeways show us that the true scale of this ancient impulse to connect was far grander, more intricate, and more woven into the fabric of the prehistoric world than we ever dared to dream. We have been studying the surviving sentences, but we are only now beginning to see the outlines of the entire book. Ghost roads become real when they are walked in stories long before they are built in stone. The most durable thread connecting one generation to the next across vast chasms of time may not be stone or even memory, but myth. How could the idea of a sacred pathway persist for 1,000 years between cultures with no written records and no direct lineage? The answer whispers to us from the world of oral tradition, from the campfire tales and ceremonial chants that were the living libraries of the ancient world. Imagine a story passed from elder to child over countless generations about a founding hero who walked a specific route across the land, from the river's source to the mountain's peak, to receive wisdom from the spirits. That story, repeated season after season, century after century, would slowly saturate the landscape with meaning. The hill where the hero rested was no longer just a hill. The spring where she drank became a sacred place. The path she took transformed from a physical trail into a mythic itinerary, a template written not on parchment, but directly onto the collective imagination of the people. Now consider a new culture arriving in that same region generations later. They encounter these local landmarks, and they hear the fragments of the old stories from the people who came before them, or perhaps they simply feel the numinous weight of the places themselves. They do not need to understand the original language or the specific details of the ancient tale. They absorb the core idea that this particular line across the earth is a powerful one, a path walked by ancestors or deities. To cement their own place in this storied land, they do something profound. They take that intangible, mythical journey and they make it permanent. They build their monumental causeway directly along the remembered path of the ancestors. In this act, the later builders are not connecting to the forgotten masons who piled the stones of the old burial mound. They are connecting to the powerful narrative that now envelops that mound. The causeway becomes a physical manifestation of the myth, a way to literally walk in the footsteps of legend. This process of mythic appropriation elegantly explains the jarring cultural gaps we see in the archaeology. The pottery styles change, the burial rites evolve, but the story of the land and the powerful alignment it describes endures. The new culture adopts the old sacred geography, not because they share blood with its original builders, but because they have come to share the story. They are building the highway for a journey their own community now wishes to take, following a map drawn in the oldest ink of all. The human need to explain where we are by telling tales of how we got here. The stories that sanctified a path could also begin with a simple, practical need. Alongside the profound spiritual motives, we must weigh a more grounded possibility, the economic and trade network theory. Could some of these monumental causeways have originated as vital trade routes, only later becoming sanctified through centuries of use and ceremony? This idea presents a compelling counterpoint, reminding us that ancient people navigated a world of both spirit and survival. Imagine a well-worn trail connecting two early farming communities. This path is not yet lined with stones or raised banks, but it is essential. Along it travels a precious cargo, blocks of salt from a coastal evaporation site, fine flint from a prized quarry for making tools, or perhaps glossy black obsidian from a distant volcanic flow for crafting razor-sharp blades. This route is a lifeline, a channel for materials that define technology, status, and daily life. The people who walk it regularly do so with a mix of hope and trepidation, for travel in the ancient world was fraught with physical danger and the uncertainty of encounters. Over generations, as this route proves its worth, something subtle begins to happen. The community starts to formalize it. They clear it more thoroughly, add simple markers, or build rough bridges over streams to make the journey safer and more reliable. As the path becomes a fixed feature in the landscape, it also becomes woven into the community's identity and their understanding of protection. Deities associated with travel, safe passage, and commerce might be invoked at points along the way. What began as a pragmatic corridor for flint or salt slowly accrues a layer of ritual significance. Stations for offerings or small shrines could appear at fords or hilltops, blending gratitude for safe travel with reverence for the spirits of the place. In this model, the sacred does not create the path. The path, through relentless practical use, becomes sacred. We see potential echoes of this in certain archaeological connections. A causeway might link a major flint mining complex, a place of intense, smoky industrial activity, directly to a distant ceremonial enclosure where tools were used or offered. The road itself would then represent the entire cycle, from extraction to ritual consumption, making the journey of the material part of its cultural meaning. The practical and the spiritual are not separate lanes here, but merge into a single, meaningful track. However, this elegantly practical theory runs into formidable obstacles when confronted with the full breadth of the evidence. It struggles mightily to explain the many causeways that connect two sites which show no signs of utilitarian function. Why build a 10-kilometer-long, engineered stone highway between two burial mounds, with no evidence of settlement, mining, or marketplace at either end? Why invest such labor in a road that leads from one stone circle to another, traversing miles of empty moorland? Furthermore, some of these monuments traverse what would be, for regular trade, impossibly difficult terrain. They go straight over steep hills instead of taking an easier contour, or they march directly through boggy ground that would be a nightmare for transporting heavy goods season after season. This suggests that for many of these structures, the destination was everything, and the most direct, symbolically potent line was paramount, regardless of the engineering challenge or practical inefficiency. The road was not designed for the easy movement of carts or porters. It was designed for the ritual movement of people and ideas, following a logic that valued celestial alignment or mythic connection over mere convenience. So while trade may have played a role in the genesis of some pathways, it cannot be the universal key. The causeways that defy practical explanation point us back toward a deeper, more enduring human motivation, one that sought to map meaning itself onto the earth, connecting points of power in a network that served the spirit first and the economy a distant second. The stones themselves stand as silent witnesses to the hands that placed them. This final layer of the mystery asks not about celestial maps or spiritual forces, but about the people themselves, about the society that could conceive of and complete such a staggering project. When we look at a megalithic causeway, we are seeing the physical outcome of a profound social agreement. The sheer scale of labor involved in quarrying, moving, and placing thousands of tons of material represents more than engineering. It is an act of social cohesion on a grand scale. Building a 10-kilometer-long ceremonial avenue was not the work of a single village acting alone. It required the coordinated effort of multiple family groups, clans, or even an entire regional population, working together over seasons or generations toward a single, unifying goal. This shared endeavor would have forged a powerful common identity. The very act of building together the planning, the toil, the collective problem-solving, transformed a collection of separate communities into a unified people with a shared legacy literally set in stone. The finished causeway then stood as a permanent monument to their unity, a ribbon of communal pride they could point to and say, "We built this together." Beyond unifying those within, the causeway also sent a powerful message to those outside. It acted as a permanent, undeniable territorial marker. Unlike a simple fence or a boundary ditch, this was a linear monument of immense prestige. By constructing a formal, raised corridor connecting their main settlement to an ancient and widely respected site, like a revered burial mound or a sacred spring, a community was doing something brilliantly strategic. They were physically and ritually stitching their own identity and their claim to the land to a source of ancient, unquestioned power. The causeway became a line of legitimacy drawn directly across the landscape, visible for miles. It stated clearly and without words that this corridor, and by extension the lands around it, fell under their influence and protection. They were declaring themselves the inheritors and custodians of that deep history. For any neighboring group, the message was unmistakable. This was not just a path, it was a claim, a demonstration of organizational strength and spiritual authority so formidable that to challenge it would be to challenge the ancestors and the gods themselves. The road served both the community's internal spirit and its external sovereignty, binding people to place and past in one monumental gesture. The monumental causeways of the past are not a closed book. Their meaning echoes in living traditions that have endured for thousands of years. To truly grasp the purpose of those ancient stone avenues, we can look to the deep cultural knowledge preserved by many indigenous peoples today. These are not relics but active, breathing systems of meaning that show us how a landscape can be a story and a path can be a prayer. A profound example exists in the vast heart of Australia. For the Aboriginal peoples, the continent is crisscrossed with songlines. These are not physical roads in the European sense, but intricate dreaming tracks that weave across the entire land, connecting sacred sites, water sources, and ancestral landmarks. Each songline is a living map, but it is a map written in song, dance, and story. It encodes the journey of a creator ancestor during the dreaming, the foundational era when the world was shaped. Every rock formation, every river bend, every distinctive tree along the route is a stanza in an epic poem. To know the songline is to know the lore, the history, and the navigation of the country. The act of traveling a songline is an act of creation itself, As custodians walk the land, they sing the ancestral songs associated with each feature. This ceremonial journey is not just remembering the past, it is actively maintaining the world. It is believed that by singing the country, they keep it alive and in balance, reinforcing the cosmic order established in the dreaming. While these are not built stone causeways with parallel banks, they represent the exact same conceptual framework we have been exploring. They reveal a worldview where the landscape is a sacred narrative, and movement along specific prescribed lines is essential to cultural and spiritual survival. The path itself holds the knowledge. This powerful anthropological insight offers a vital lens for understanding the megalithic causeways of prehistoric Europe and the Americas. It suggests that those ancient stone avenues may be the monumental, permanent expression of a similar worldview. The builders were not merely constructing a road from point A to point B. They were physically etching their own songline into the earth. Walking the Cursus or the Sacbeob was likely an act of recitation, a way to sing the stories of the ancestors, to celebrate the movements of the sun and moon, and to affirm the community's place within a living cosmos. The stones were the permanent verses, ensuring the song could never be forgotten, and the path would always be there to walk. This connection across millennia and continents points to something universal. It reveals that before we built highways for commerce, we built pathways for meaning, tracing the sacred geography of our world one deliberate step at a time. These silent stones hold many possible truths. Interpreting their purpose is one of archaeology's most delicate arts, a process constantly reshaped by the perspectives of those doing the looking. The early antiquarians and archaeologists of the 19th and early 20th centuries brought their own world to these ancient lines. Living in an age of empires, railroads, and clear national borders, they often saw the past through that lens. To them, a long, straight earthwork across the countryside logically suggested a military road for moving troops, or perhaps a formal boundary marker delineating the territory of some primitive but ambitious king. This was a view of history as a story of conquest, territory, and linear progress, projected backward onto peoples who may have understood power and community in completely different terms. Today, our interpretive pendulum has swung dramatically in the other direction. Informed by anthropology and a greater respect for indigenous worldviews, modern archaeologists overwhelmingly favor ritual, ceremonial, and cosmological explanations for these causeways. We see them as processional ways, astronomical sightlines, and bonds with the ancestors. This shift is more accurate, more respectful, but it brings its own subtle danger. In our well-intentioned search for meaning, we must be careful not to romanticize the past or to project our own modern spiritualities and ecological sensibilities onto people whose inner lives are forever lost to us. Were they deeply connected to the land? Almost certainly. But was that connection identical to our own contemporary ideas of earth energies or holistic harmony? We cannot assume so. This is the fundamental challenge of prehistory. These societies left no written records, no manifestos or sacred texts to explain their actions. We are left with the architecture itself, a language of stone and earth without a dictionary. Every theory we construct, whether it highlights celestial observation, social cohesion, or mythic geography, is a lens we choose to look through. Each lens reveals certain patterns and obscures others. The astronomical lens shows us precise solstice alignments. The social lens reveals the staggering communal effort required. The spiritual lens feels the palpable weight of ceremonial space. The truth of these causeways likely does not lie neatly behind any single one of these windows. It almost certainly involves a combination of all these factors, blended in proportions we may never fully disentangle. For the people who built them, the practical, the social, and the sacred were probably not separate categories at all, but different threads in the same tightly woven fabric of life. A walk along the Cursus at the equinox could have been simultaneously a lesson in astronomy, a reaffirmation of community ties, a pilgrimage to honor the ancestors, and a powerful political statement to neighboring groups, all in a single, deliberate journey. This complexity does not mean we should stop looking for answers. Instead, it invites a necessary humility when facing the deep past. We are not decoding a simple message. We are listening for echoes in a vast canyon, learning to appreciate the resonance even when we cannot hear the original voice. That shared human capacity for sacred geometry sparks one of history's most tantalizing what-ifs. At the farthest edge of speculation, some have wondered if these global patterns point not to independent minds, but to a single, forgotten source. Could there have been a lost global civilization, a highly advanced seafaring culture that sailed the ancient world, planting the seeds of aligned construction and sacred geometry everywhere they landed? It is a captivating idea, one that paints a picture of master navigators sharing blueprints for connecting heaven and earth. Proponents of this view highlight the startling similarities, asking how cultures separated by oceans could arrive at such precise and parallel ideas about solstice alignments and processional ways without some form of contact. The theory suggests a primordial teacher, a common architect for humanity's first sacred landscapes. Yet, for all its romantic appeal, this extreme diffusionist view stands on profoundly shaky ground when scrutinized by the meticulous methods of modern archaeology. The academic consensus rejects it, not out of closed-mindedness, but due to a stark and consistent absence of evidence. There is no credible archaeological trail, no shared pottery styles, no sudden introductions of foreign crops or animals, no genetic markers, and no shipwrecks or harbors. That supports sustained transoceanic contact during the Neolithic periods when these monuments first arose. More damningly, the detailed cultural sequences at each site tell a story of deep local evolution. In Britain, we can trace a continuous, unbroken development from early earthen long barrows to later stone circles, with each phase showing clear technological and social progression rooted in that specific soil. In Mesoamerica, the story of Maya civilization unfolds from simple villages to towering cities without any sudden injection of foreign architectural genius. The cultures built upon what their own ancestors had started, not upon instructions from a mysterious overseas tutor. This does not make the worldwide pattern any less miraculous. In fact, it makes it far more profound. The beauty of the independent invention model is what it reveals about us as a species. It speaks to a shared human cognitive toolkit, a universal capacity that emerges when societies cross a similar threshold. When a culture becomes stable enough to look beyond mere survival, when it begins to ponder its place within the vast cosmos and seeks to anchor its identity in the land, a fascinating solution appears again and again. Building long, straight monuments to formally connect significant points, whether those points are ancestral tombs, celestial markers, or sources of water, seems to be a recurring architectural instinct. It is as if the human mind, confronting the mysteries of existence, independently discovers that drawing a deliberate line across the earth is a powerful way to create meaning, order, and connection. This innate solution reflects a deep-seated need to make the intangible relationships of spirit, memory, and cosmos tangible, to walk them with our own feet. The Causeway is not a copied blueprint, but a universal sentence written in the native language of stone, each culture finding its own words for the same profound declaration. The stones themselves carry a hidden story within their crystalline structure. While myths and alignments speak of spiritual connections, material science offers a more tangible form of evidence, a forensic trail written in granite and sandstone. Modern archaeology can now read this geological fingerprint through a technique called petrographic analysis. This process involves taking a thin slice of a monument stone and examining it under a powerful microscope. Like a detective analyzing the specific grain and composition of a soil sample, a geologist can pinpoint the exact quarry, sometimes even the precise outcrop where that stone originated. This transforms anonymous rock into a data point with a very specific address. Applying this science to the stones of a megalithic causeway can reveal startling patterns of intention. Imagine a scenario where petrography shows that the stones used to build the burial mound at one end of the causeway are all local, sourced from a nearby hillside. However, the stones used to construct the ceremonial enclosure at the other end are not local at all. Their geological signature matches a quarry 50 miles away, and crucially, that quarry lies directly along the line of the causeway itself. This would be a powerful clue. It suggests the causeway was not merely a ritual path, but a functional transport corridor, a practical highway built to move massive, sacred building materials from their source to their final, hallowed destination. The road literally facilitated the connection, carrying the physical substance of one monument to create the other, linking the sites in a direct chain of material and meaning. But science can reveal a very different, equally profound story. Consider the opposite finding. Petrographic analysis might show that the stones at both connected sites, the ancient mound and the later henge, were not sourced from any local area. Instead, they both originated from the same distant, singular quarry, a place with no other apparent settlements or monuments. This changes the narrative completely. It suggests that both cultures, separated by centuries, made the same extraordinary effort to haul stone from this one specific, faraway location. The shared source becomes the key. That distant quarry was likely not just a source of rock, but a sacred place in its own right, a numinous location whose very geology was considered powerful or holy. By using stone from that revered source, both cultures were physically importing that sanctity, embedding a piece of that distant power into their local monuments. The causeway, then, becomes a later acknowledgement of that shared sacred geography, a formal line connecting two places that already shared a deep, material bond through the stones they chose. In this way, the silent geology speaks volumes. It can reveal a practical supply route for ambitious builders, or it can unveil a spiritual lineage, a shared reverence for a special piece of the earth that transcended time and cultural change. The path between the sites is no longer just a line on a map, but a clue in a much larger story of how ancient people perceived, valued, and connected with the very bones of their world. This concept of the soul's path brings us to the very nature of time itself. The ancient builders likely perceived their world through a very different temporal lens than we do today. For many of these cultures, time was not a straight arrow shooting from a past into a future. It was a great turning wheel. Life moved in cycles, mirroring the dependable return of the seasons, the eternal dance of the sun and moon, and the endless rhythm of planting and harvest, life and passing. Within this grand, circular understanding of existence, the linear causeway presents a fascinating paradox. It is a straight, unswerving line carved into a cyclical world. This deliberate linearity suggests it represented something special, a singular narrative thread within the repeating pattern. The causeway may have symbolized the one journey that does not repeat, the ultimate transition. This is the sacred passage from the realm of the living to the realm of the ancestors, from a state of ordinary awareness to a state of ritual knowledge, or from spiritual ignorance to a hard-won enlightenment. Walking the formal avenue was likely far more than simple travel. It could have been a profound ritual of symbolic death and rebirth. As a participant left their village and stepped onto the raised path, they were symbolically leaving the familiar, cyclical world of daily life. With each step along that unwavering line, they moved further from their old self. By the time they reached the terminal sanctuary, the burial mound, or the stone circle, they had arrived at a threshold, a place between worlds. The ceremonies performed there would then represent a transformation, a rebirth into a new state of understanding or connection, before the individual returned along the same path, now changed back into the cyclical flow of community life. This shared concept of the transformative, linear journey within the Great Cycle could be the powerful, universal idea that transcended specific cultures. It explains why a later people with different gods and different tools would feel such a compelling need to connect to an ancient site. They were not necessarily honoring the specific ancestors buried there. They were honoring the universal power of the journey that site represented. They recognized it as a terminal point on a sacred map of the soul, a map they also believed in. So they built their own formal road to it, ensuring that their community, too, could walk that transformative path. The physical causeway, therefore, becomes more than a road. It is a three-dimensional metaphor. It is the soul's path made solid, a permanent invitation to walk the one straight line that matters within the beautiful, endless circle of existence. This idea was potent enough to inspire the moving of mountains, a testament to the deepest human yearning to map our inner journey onto the outer world. A community facing a failing harvest might build a road to the gods. The very ground beneath these ancient causeways holds another clue, not in its stones but in its pollen and its ice. Scientists can now reconstruct the ancient climate with startling precision, analyzing everything from trapped air bubbles in deep ice cores to the microscopic pollen grains preserved in lakebed mud. These environmental archives reveal that the rise of monumental construction often coincides not with times of plenty, but with periods of profound instability. A prolonged drought could wither crops for a generation. A sudden global cooling, like the one that occurred around 3,200 years before the Common Era, could shorten growing seasons and push communities to the brink. In such times of collective anxiety, when the old ways of survival seem to falter, human societies often turn with renewed intensity toward the unseen world. Ritual becomes not just a celebration, but a vital technology for intervention. The decision to build a monumental causeway during a climate crisis can be seen as the ultimate communal prayer, an act of both desperation and profound hope. It represents a society pooling its last reserves of energy and unity, not to build a granary or a well, though those are practical, but to construct a permanent, physical plea etched into the landscape itself. They are building a direct line to a place of perceived power, an ancestral tomb, a sacred spring, in a desperate attempt to renegotiate their contract with the cosmos, to restore the balance that has been lost. This framework offers a powerful lens for understanding the layered causeways that connect different eras. Imagine a later culture arriving in a region during another period of hardship, perhaps a centuries-long dry spell. They discover the remnants of an ancient causeway, its banks still visible, leading to a time-worn mound. Through local lore or simply by feeling the weight of the place, they understand this was built by the ancients during a great trial. To them, this old road is not a ruin, it is a proven ritual instrument, a tool that their predecessors used to navigate a crisis. Their response is not to ignore it, but to refurbish it, to extend it, to reactivate its sacred function for their own time of need. In doing so, they are not merely connecting to the old builders, they are connecting to the ancient solution. The causeway becomes a generational handbook for resilience, written in earth and stone. Each new layer of construction is a chapter added during another moment of environmental stress, a testament to the enduring human belief that when the world becomes unpredictable, the most powerful response is to build a straight, unwavering path toward what you hold most sacred. The silence of these ancient stones is an illusion. Emerging research in a field called sensory archaeology is now asking a profound new question. What did walking these sacred pathways truly feel like? It shifts our focus from the grand, visual spectacle of the monuments to the intimate, bodily experience of the people who used them. This approach listens to the past, and what it hears transforms a simple walk into a carefully orchestrated ritual of sound and sensation. Consider the architecture of a great Cursus monument. Those two massive, parallel earthen banks did more than just mark a boundary. They acted as a natural acoustic channel, a long, open-air corridor of earth that would focus and carry sound directly along its central axis. Imagine the moment a procession began with rhythmic drumming or communal chanting. Within the confines of the banks, that sound would not dissipate into the open air. Instead, it would become concentrated, reverberating, traveling down the avenue ahead of the walkers and echoing behind them. The sound would physically surround the participants, creating an immersive, almost overwhelming auditory environment. You would not just hear the ceremony, you would be immersed inside it, the very architecture of the path amplifying the collective voice and heartbeat of the community. This was not an accident, it was acoustic engineering in the service of the spirit. The experience underfoot was equally deliberate. The surface of these roads was not left to chance. On a Maya Sacbeob, the smooth, hard cap of white limestone plaster would have created a firm, resonant surface. Footsteps, especially of a large group, would have produced a distinct, unified sound, a rhythmic scrape and click that was utterly different from the soft, muffled tread of a jungle path. In Britain, walking the packed chalk of a Cursus would have offered a brighter, crunchier sensation, a pale dust perhaps rising with each step, marking the procession visually as well as sonically. Every sensory detail was part of the design, meticulously engineered to separate the sacred journey from the mundane act of everyday travel. This crafted experience offers a powerful new explanation for why later cultures might preserve and refurbish an ancient causeway. A new group arriving in a region might discover the overgrown banks of a forgotten avenue. As they cleared it and walked its length, they would have been struck not just by where it led, but by how it felt to walk it. The unique acoustic channel, the specific sound of footsteps on its surface, the way it framed the sky, this was a complete experiential template, a ready-made ritual environment. They may have valued this sensory package as much as the destinations it connected. By maintaining the physical structure, they were preserving a powerful technology for transformation, a known method for engineering a collective state of mind through movement, sound, and touch. The road was not just a map, it was the mechanism. That sensory pathway of sound and stone did not end with the last ancient footstep. The profound human impulse to carve a direct, intentional line across the earth is a legacy that literally paved the way for our modern world. Look at the long, ruler-straight roads of the Roman Empire, engineering marvels designed for the rapid movement of legions and commerce. Archaeological surveys have repeatedly shown that these famous Roman highways did not always blaze a new trail. In many cases, they formalized and paved over far older prehistoric trackways, those same ceremonial causeways and processional routes that had been walked for millennia. The Romans, masters of practical infrastructure, recognized a good line when they saw one, adopting the ancient sacred geography for their own imperial purposes. This pattern of sacred overlay continues deep into the historical era. Consider the great Christian pilgrimage routes like the Camino de Santiago stretching across Europe to the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela. For centuries, millions have walked this path in devotion. Yet, scholars note that long stretches of the Camino do not follow the logical, modern road network. Instead, they trace a more ancient, meandering course that connects holy wells, pre-Christian standing stones, and hilltop shrines. It is widely accepted that these pilgrimage paths often deliberately overlay much older pagan processional ways, Christianizing the ancient spiritual geography by redirecting its purpose toward a new faith, but following the same old, powerful lines in the land. Even in our contemporary landscape, the ghost of the causeway lingers. There are curious and well-documented cases where modern highways and country lanes, surveyed and built with contemporary tools, run with eerie precision along the same alignments as suspected ancient ley lines or directly between known archaeological sites. This is not evidence of a hidden energy grid, but rather something perhaps more profound. It suggests that the most logical, direct, and often most stable routes across a landscape, the ridges above floodplains, the dry paths between springs, were identified and sanctified by the very first people to deeply know that land. Those routes became embedded in the collective memory of the place, passed down through story, tradition, and the subtle, enduring imprint of footfall on earth. Over centuries, this embedded knowledge subtly influenced where a medieval drover would take his cattle, where a farmer would build a lane between fields, and eventually where a modern engineer would lay asphalt. The megalithic causeway, therefore, stands as the primordial archetype. It is the first bold sentence in a very long story of human movement. It represents the moment we decided that a journey should not be a wandering search, but a deliberate, monumental act. We transitioned from finding our way to making our way, from following animal trails to imposing our own sacred and practical geometry upon the world. That original template, a straight line connecting 2 points of deep significance, has never left us. It evolved from a ceremonial avenue of stone to a pilgrim's path of faith, to an imperial road of conquest, and finally to the highway that carries us today. Each iteration serves a different master, but the underlying form, the human desire for a direct and meaningful connection, remains unchanged. We are still building causeways. We just call them by different names. But this story of deep human ingenuity has been overshadowed by a more sensational myth. It is time to address the persistent idea that these causeways, and indeed all ancient wonders, were built by visitors from other worlds or with lost, super-advanced technology. This narrative, while captivating, fundamentally misunderstands both the monuments and the people who made them. The truth is more impressive than any fiction about alien intervention. The engineering behind these roads, while monumental, is a testament to human labor, patience, and clever, simple tools. Think of the basic principles. To move a massive stone, you do not need anti-gravity devices. You need a sledge, a team of ropes, a lubricated track of wet clay or logs, and the coordinated strength of dozens of determined people. To achieve a perfect straight line over miles, you do not need a laser from space. You need a series of tall sighting poles, a clear line of vision, and a deep understanding of basic geometry, knowledge that many ancient cultures possessed and refined over generations. The astronomical alignments are perhaps the most misunderstood. They are not proof of extraterrestrial GPS coordinates. They are the result of profound, patient observation. A dedicated priest or elder could spend a lifetime watching the horizon, marking the sun's most extreme rising and setting points on stones or posts, year after year, decade after decade. That lifetime of watching could then be passed to an apprentice, and that knowledge, accumulated over centuries, becomes the precise alignment we measure with our modern instruments today. This was not magic or alien science. It was the rigorous, generational science of its time, a deep partnership between the human mind and the observable cosmos. To attribute these achievements to outside forces is to do a profound disservice to our ancestors. It robs them of their genius, their creativity, and their humanity. They were not primitive people waiting for a savior from the stars. They were brilliant observers, masterful social organizers, and profound philosophers who sought meaning in their world and expressed it in the most enduring language they knew, stone and earth. Their legacy is not a mystery to be solved by looking upward for otherworldly help, but a testament to be understood by looking inward at the incredible capabilities of human communities united by a shared vision. The real wonder is not that aliens might have built these roads, but that we, as a species, so consistently chose to build them again and again, with nothing but our own hands, our own minds, and our own enduring need to connect. The story of these roads is not just about the stones, but about the hands that shaped them. For too long, our imagination of the ancient world has been dominated by a single powerful figure, a priest-king standing alone on a hill, directing a faceless workforce below. This traditional view paints a picture of top-down authority, where one man's vision commands the labor of many. But when we look at the true scale of a megalithic causeway, a project spanning decades or even centuries, that old narrative begins to crumble under the weight of its own impracticality. No single lifetime and no single leader's will could possibly account for such a sustained, generational endeavor. The real power behind these monuments was not a throne, but a community. This shifts our focus from a solitary architect to a vibrant, collective effort, where every member, regardless of gender or age, played a crucial part. Women were absolutely central to this undertaking, though their contributions are often invisible in the archaeological record of stone. Their role extended far beyond the periphery. While the physical moving of the largest stones might have involved teams of strong individuals, the entire enterprise rested on a foundation they provided. Think of the immense logistical support required. Feeding hundreds of workers day after day, season after season, was a monumental task in itself. This meant managing crops, preserving food, organizing cooking for massive groups, and ensuring a steady supply of water and provisions to the worksite. This was not incidental work, it was the critical infrastructure that made the construction possible. Furthermore, the creation and maintenance of tools, sharpening antler picks, weaving baskets for moving earth, preparing leather ropes, would have been a constant, skilled activity, likely involving many hands across the community. To see these roles as separate from the real work of building is to misunderstand the nature of the project entirely. The causeway was built not just by those who lifted the stones, but by those who sustained the lifters. This communal effort likely transformed the construction site into something more than a workplace. For societies deeply tied to agricultural cycles, this massive project may have been a seasonal festival, a time when the normal rhythms of life were set aside for a shared, sacred purpose. During quieter periods in the farming calendar, entire families might have traveled to the site. The air would have been filled with more than the sound of work. There would have been storytelling, shared meals, teaching, and ritual. Elders might have explained the celestial alignments to the young, while others prepared offerings. The act of building became a powerful social glue, a recurring event that reinforced identity, shared values, and a collective sense of ownership over the emerging monument. In this light, the causeway is not a testament to one leader's ego, but a physical manifestation of a community's unity and its covenant with the land. It is a monument to we, not I. This community-focused view finally helps solve the core mystery of why later cultures would connect to these ancient places. If we see the old site only as the tomb of a forgotten chief, the later causeway seems like an act of vague reverence. But if we see it as a place saturated with the memory of profound communal achievement, the act of connection becomes far more meaningful. A new group arriving in the area might hear legends not of a mighty king, but of the ancestors who built together. They would see the enduring result of that collective faith and labor, the long, straight road that defied time. To build their own causeway to that place was not just to honor the old stones. It was to tap into that powerful legacy of communal harmony and successful cosmic negotiation. They were physically linking their own community's effort to the ultimate symbol of communal success, hoping to invoke that same spirit of unity and purpose for their own time. The road thus becomes a bridge between communities across centuries, all of whom understood that the greatest monuments are not built by commands, but by common purpose. The concept of the axis mundi offers a breathtaking key to this ancient puzzle. Across the globe, from the frozen tundras of Siberia to the steaming jungles of Mesoamerica, cultures with no conceivable contact shared a nearly identical vision of the cosmos. They envisioned a central axis, a sacred pillar or a towering tree that connected the three great realms of existence. Its roots plunged deep into the underworld, its trunk stood firm in the world of the living, and its highest branches reached into the heavens. This was not just a pretty story, it was a fundamental map of reality, a way to understand humanity's place within a vast, layered universe. The axis mundi was the point where communication between the gods, the ancestors, and the living could occur. It was the still center around which the chaos of creation spun into order. Now, consider the megalithic causeway not as a simple road, but as this sacred axis laid horizontally upon the earth. Instead of a vertical tree connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld, imagine a long, straight line of stone connecting two powerful, vertical points in the landscape. One terminus might be a mountain peak scraping the sky, a natural place of the gods. The other could be a deep spring or a cave, a portal to the watery underworld. The causeway itself becomes the trunk, the horizontal axis that binds these two vertical poles of power into a single, stable system. By building it, a community was not merely constructing a processional way. They were performing a profound act of cosmic engineering. They were physically grounding the spiritual axis of their world, pinning it to the landscape to create stability and order. This shared deep myth, this universal human intuition about a central connector, provides a powerful explanation for why the practice arose independently. A Siberian shaman might visualize the axis mundi as a great birch tree at the center of his spiritual cosmos. A Maya priest might see it as the sacred ceiba tree, whose roots reached into Xibalba, the underworld. Though separated by an entire planet, both understood that reality required a central support, a conduit for spiritual travel. When these cultures reached a level of social organization that allowed for monumental building, they naturally sought to manifest this inner cosmological map onto the outer world. They translated the vertical symbol of the world tree into a horizontal line of stone, creating a terrestrial axis that anyone could walk. This act was the ultimate declaration of belonging and purpose. It was a way of saying, here, along this line, is the center of our world. Here, we have made the invisible axis visible, and in doing so, we have secured our place within the grand structure of the cosmos. The causeway was their anchor in eternity. This profound silence is the canvas upon which all our theories are painted. The builders of these causeways left behind no instruction manuals, no dedicatory inscriptions carved into the stone, no grand frescoes depicting priests processing down the gleaming white road. Their voice is not in words but in the weight of the stones and the direction of the line. This absence of explicit explanation is, for the modern researcher, a source of both immense frustration and unexpected freedom. On one hand, it means we cannot simply translate a stela or read a papyrus to know the causeway's true name or the specific festival it celebrated. We are denied the intimate details, the names of the gods invoked, the exact words of the chants that echoed down its length. We stand before these monuments as outsiders, forever separated from the living context that gave them breath. Yet, this very silence liberates the monuments from a single, fixed meaning. Because there is no official text to dictate one interpretation, the causeway is free to speak in a more primal, universal dialect. Its language is one of pure form, of geometry, of relationship. It speaks through the unswerving straightness of its course, through the deliberate choice to span a river here or crest a hill there, through the precise way its ends kiss the base of an ancient tomb or frame the rising sun. This is a language that transcends the particular words of any one culture. It communicates intention through alignment, purpose through placement, and reverence through endurance. A later culture arriving in the region, perhaps one that also did not use writing, would not need a translated decree to understand the power of this statement. They could look at the long, raised earthwork cutting across the countryside and intuitively grasp its significance. They would see it was not a farm boundary or a defensive wall. They would feel the intentionality in its form. They would recognize it as a deliberate act of connection, a monumental line drawn to link two points of importance. They might not know the original names for the gods honored, but they would understand the grammar of sacred geography. This shared, non-verbal understanding may be precisely why they felt compelled to build their own additions, to refurbish the old path, or to orient their new monuments to its line. They were not reading a text they could not decipher. They were reading a sentence written in the landscape itself, and they understood its syntax perfectly. Our modern interpretations, therefore, must humbly follow their lead. Without written sources to lean on, we are forced into a deeper, more holistic form of listening. We must use the tools of archaeology to read the soil, the tools of anthropology to understand shared human patterns of ritual, and the tools of our own senses to feel the impact of walking that prescribed path. We piece together clues from the smallest artifact found near the terminus to the vast, celestial clockwork implied by its alignment. This process is less about finding a single, definitive answer, and more about engaging in a continuous conversation with the stones. The silence of the sources, in the end, invites us to listen more carefully to everything else, to hear the story the land itself has never forgotten. The silent stones may soon speak through the very chemistry of bone. While we have listened to the landscape and read the alignments, the next chapter of this mystery will be written in laboratories, not in libraries. Cutting-edge scientific techniques are now poised to ask questions of these ancient pathways that the builders themselves could never have anticipated, moving us from interpreting monuments to understanding the lives of the individuals who walked them. One of the most powerful tools is ancient DNA analysis. By studying genetic material carefully extracted from the remains of individuals interred at the connected sites, the ancient tomb at one end of the causeway and the later enclosure at the other, researchers can finally answer a foundational question. Were these people biologically related across the centuries, or were they genetically distinct populations? A shared genetic lineage would suggest a continuous cultural tradition, a single people maintaining and renewing their sacred geography over millennia. A clear genetic disconnect, however, would be even more revealing. It would provide concrete evidence that later communities with different biological ancestry deliberately chose to connect their world to the monuments of a people who were not their direct forebears, powerfully confirming an act of spiritual or ideological adoption rather than simple inheritance. Beyond ancestry, science can now trace the journey of a single life. This is done through a technique called strontium isotope analysis. The story is written in our teeth. As our teeth form in childhood, they incorporate minerals from the local water and food we consume. These minerals carry a unique isotopic signature, a chemical fingerprint of the specific geology of the region where we grew up. By analyzing a tiny sample from an ancient tooth, scientists can match that signature to geological maps. Imagine discovering that an individual laid to rest in a tomb at the end of a Cursus monument had a strontium signature from a coastal region 50 miles away. This single data point transforms from a statistic into a biography. It tells us that person did not grow up locally. They traveled or were brought to this place. Now apply this to multiple remains from sites connected by these ceremonial roads. If we find a pattern of non-local individuals at both ends of the causeway, it suggests these pathways were not just for local processions. They were conduits for people moving across the landscape, perhaps for marriage alliances, for pilgrimage, or for the gathering of specialized ritual practitioners from distant communities. The causeway literally guided feet that had walked from far away to a shared point of convergence. On the largest scale, the mystery demands a view from orbit. The true pattern may only become visible when we can see every known causeway, lay, and alignment on a single digital map. This is the realm of big data and geographic information systems, or GIS. Researchers are beginning to compile vast databases of archaeological sites and their orientations. By feeding this information into sophisticated analytical software, they can search for continental scale patterns that are invisible to someone studying a single monument in isolation. Could there be a previously unseen web of alignments that uses certain prominent mountain peaks as repeating nodes across thousands of miles? Do these ceremonial pathways correlate with specific types of ecological zones, ancient river networks, or migratory routes of animals that were spiritually significant? This data-driven approach allows us to move beyond isolated examples and toward modeling the entire system. We can finally test hypotheses about the spread of ideas with statistical rigor, looking for directional flows or cultural hotspots. It may reveal that the impulse to build these lines followed the very contours of the Earth itself, shaped by climate, resource availability, and the deep human need to navigate a meaningful world. The stones gave us the questions. Now, science is giving us the tools to listen for the answers. The silent testimony of these ancient roads forces us to question a fundamental assumption. We often view prehistory as a collection of isolated chapters, each culture a separate island of innovation, rising and falling in its own lonely sea. The megalithic causeways dissolve those imagined borders. They present us with a landscape not of separation, but of profound, intentional linkage. This suggests that the people who shaped these lands operated with a mindset we struggle to grasp, a perception of connection so intrinsic that it became the bedrock of their monumental architecture. For them, geography was not a neutral backdrop for human drama. It was a sacred text, and every hill, spring, and ancestral mound was a potent word within it. To build a causeway was to write a sentence in that eternal narrative, physically drawing a line between meaningful words to create a story of belonging, memory, and cosmic order. This was an act of world-making. By connecting a place of the living to a place of the ancestors, or a terrestrial spring to a celestial alignment, they were not merely building a road. They were actively constructing the relational framework of their reality, weaving the threads of existence into a coherent, stable tapestry. The straight line of stone was their declaration that these points were not random, but part of a single, interconnected whole. This hints at a mode of understanding that predates, and perhaps transcends, written language. It was a deep, pre-literate communication shared not through alphabets, but through the shared grammar of the land itself. Different cultures arriving at different times could look at the same powerful locations and feel the same compelling pull. They did not need to share a common tongue or pottery style to recognize that a certain mountain pass held meaning, or that a solstice sunrise over a particular stone demanded acknowledgement. The landscape itself was the medium, and the act of building upon it was the message. This recurring impulse to monumentalize connection reveals a startling possibility. Human history may be less a story of isolated tribes inventing in parallel, and more a subtle, resonant story of recurring ideas. It is as if the great questions of existence, where do we come from? What is our place in the cosmos? How do we honor what came before? Elicited similar architectural answers from human minds across the globe when they reached a certain stage of contemplation. The causeway is one of those profound answers. It is the three-dimensional expression of a universal human intuition. That meaning is found not in isolated points, but in the lines we draw between them. These stone pathways remind us that long before we built networks of information, we built networks of meaning, physically connecting the dots of our world to reveal a picture of our place within it. Their enduring silence speaks to a connection deeper than culture, a shared human yearning to map our deepest questions onto the very skin of the earth. A constellation of clues now forms a single, breathtaking picture. We have journeyed through the evidence, from the celestial alignments etched in stone to the silent stories held in ancient teeth, and a unified narrative begins to emerge. The megalithic causeway is not one mystery with a single key. It is a symphony of human needs played out across the landscape, with each culture contributing its own unique instrument to a timeless melody. The astronomical precision provided the score, a cosmic rhythm that dictated where the sacred lines should fall. The spiritual pilgrimage was the performance, the act of walking that transformed belief into lived experience. The immense social cohesion required to build these monuments was the orchestra itself, the community harmonizing its labor toward a transcendent goal. The territorial marking was the announcement of that performance to the wider world, a declaration of presence and legacy, and the responses to environmental change were the powerful, urgent motivations that often compelled the symphony to be written in the first place, a collective plea for balance etched permanently into the earth. These elements converge to create the profound pattern of connecting culturally unrelated sites. It likely unfolded not through conquest or dictated instruction, but through a subtle, powerful process of mythic appropriation. A later people arriving in a region would encounter the old stones. They might not know the names of the builders or the specific rites performed there, but they could feel the weight of the place. They would see the enduring causeway still visible, pointing like a stone arrow toward a distant hill or tomb. Through fragments of local lore or simply through the palpable presence of the site itself, they would absorb a fundamental truth: this line connected places of power. The ancient road and the locations it linked were numinous, charged with a significance that transcended the particular culture that first recognized it. The new community did not see a ruin belonging to strangers. They saw a validated sacred geography, a proven template for engaging with the spirit of the land. So they did not discard it, they adopted it. They cleared the overgrown path, repaired its banks, or built a new, parallel avenue to link their own ceremonial center to that same hallowed endpoint. In doing so, they were not stealing someone else's heritage. They were participating in a deeper, ongoing conversation with the landscape itself, adding their own chapter to a story that had begun centuries before. This created a palimpsest of connection, a manuscript of meaning written, rewritten, and layered over millennia. The earliest farmers built a tomb on a ridge, marking a place of rest and memory. 1,000 years later, their successors built a Cursus to formally connect their gathering place to that ancient ridge. Centuries after that, a new group erected a stone circle nearby and oriented its entrance to the line of the old Cursus. Each generation inherited a map of sacred points and chose to preserve its essential lines, even as they added their own landmarks and interpretations. The independent invention of this same basic form across the globe from Britain to the Yucatan is the final, most profound piece of evidence. It tells us this is not a cultural fluke. It is a fundamental human urge. When we as a species reach a point where we can look beyond mere survival, we are compelled to create order out of chaos, to weave meaning into the vast and mysterious fabric of the world. We do this by drawing lines, both literal and spiritual, between the points that matter to us. We connect the earth to the sky, the living to the ancestors, the practical journey to the pilgrimage of the soul. The megalithic causeway is the ultimate expression of that urge, a permanent pathway carved by our deepest need to find our place, not just in a village but in the cosmos itself. The silent stone causeways of our ancestors stand as enduring testaments to a universal human quest. They are more than forgotten roads, they are physical philosophy. Each one represents a profound human decision, a choice to invest generations of labor not in a wall for defense or a granary for surplus, but in a line of connection. This was the ultimate act of world building, an insistence that meaning is found not in isolated monuments, but in the relationships we forge between them. They challenge the very framework we use to understand the past. We are taught to see history in neat, separate boxes, labeled by culture and era. The Causeways dissolve those boxes. They show us a landscape where a Bronze Age community felt a compelling need to physically link their world to a Neolithic tomb built 1,000 years earlier by people with different gods and different tools. This is not a story of conquest or simple inheritance. It is a story of recognition. It speaks to a shared, perhaps instinctive, understanding that certain places on this earth hold a power that transcends any single generation's claim. The straight line of stone was their way of acknowledging that power, of weaving their own story into a much older tapestry. In doing so, they left us a puzzle that forces a humbling realization. The ancient world may have been far more interconnected, not through trade empires or written treaties, but through a silent, common language of the land itself. Different peoples across vast spans of time could look at the same mountain, the same spring, the same arrangement of stars, and feel the same pull to mark it, to honor it, and most importantly, to connect it to another point of significance. This recurring impulse reveals something fundamental about us. The drive to build pathways, both literal and symbolic, is etched into our collective spirit. We are the species that does not merely wander. We are the species that draws lines, that builds bridges, that seeks to map our inner journeys of meaning onto the outer world. From the gleaming white roads of the Maya to the chalk corridors of Neolithic Britain, we see the same profound statement. We are here and we belong to this story. The Causeways ask us to look at our own world with new eyes. What ancient pathways in your own landscape have you unknowingly traveled? That old country lane that runs suspiciously straight for miles, the footpath that leads from the village church to a prehistoric spring now called a holy well, the modern highway that scholars note follows a Roman road which itself overlay a prehistoric track. The layers are everywhere if we choose to see them. The legacy of the Causeway is all around us in our very desire to connect points A and B in the most direct, meaningful way possible. It is a legacy written not in words, but in the enduring human need to find our place by drawing a line and then having the courage to walk it. Share your thoughts and local mysteries in the comments below. If you were captivated by this journey through deep time, subscribe for more explorations into history's greatest enigmas.